Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. When I was 17, I believe I saw a demon. Do any of you believe you've been in contact with a supernatural entity or demon? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe. When I was 5, my mom was checking out a Bed Bath & Beyond. I was looking at one of those racks they have a lot of checkout. All of a sudden, I couldn't find my mom and thought she had left without me. I started to walk out the automatic doors when I saw a person standing there with wings, telling me to go back inside. I swear on my life that this happened, and I believe it was my guardian angel. I'm aware I sound like a crazy person. When I was about 8 or 9, my father took me out for a walk in the bush on the weekend. My mother and sister were overseas visiting family members. The forest was about 45 minutes of walking, and eventually you would end up at a graveyard. Being a curious kid, I was looking at the graveyard thinking how nice the flowers are and how nice the stones looked. People put stones on graveyard-colored ones. One I remembered was green and white, so I picked it up and raced up to my dad and said, "Daddy, look." My dad gave me a serious look and said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "That gravestone over there." I pointed. My dad told me to put it back, and we never spoke anything of it and continued our way back to the car. On the way home, my dad got dinner and a toy car, which you had to build by yourself. I spent about 2 hours that night building it and went to bed. Next morning, I got up very early and continued building the car, and to put things in context, my room was on the 2nd floor, and I was facing toward the window for better lighting, I guess. Suddenly, halfway building, I looked up and there I saw it. A person, which I can't remember his face properly, was looking at me for a good 5 seconds. Then he turned to his left and went up. Very shocked and confused, I went into my dad's room and snuck into his bed. He was still asleep. I told him later that day and he believed me, saying it was most likely because you touched that person's grave. I've only told a handful of people about this, and it still scares me to this day. When I was in the hospital last year, I saw the same ghost in my room twice. I posted this story before, but it's not as interesting as most of the other stories on here. The ghost kind of looked at me like a 3D shadow of a person. It was shaped like a smaller old lady in a gown with the typical grandma haircut. It wasn't scary, just odd and interesting. I wasn't on any drugs that would make me see things either. I had 2 occurrences in the winter of 2009. The first was one morning when I was getting ready for work. It was at about 6 a.m. My apartment was dark and my front door was open because my girlfriend was just outside smoking, waiting for me. I was doing something in the living room, and I saw a figure move past me in my peripherals. I assumed it was my girlfriend. I shivered for no reason. The figure had moved toward the back of the apartment. So about 20 seconds later, I called back and asked if she was ready to go. She poked her head out from outside and said yes. I freaked the fuck out and ran outside. She swore nothing went into the apartment. Fast forward about 2 weeks, I dismissed what had happened as grogginess and moved on. I didn't have a car at the time and my girlfriend wasn't around that morning, so I was walking to work. It was about the same time as the last event, a dark winter morning. Once again, in my peripherals, I saw a figure moving, seemed to be keeping pace with me. I just got goosebumps typing this, wow. It was to my left, a wide open field area with some trees. When I looked over, there was a shadowy figure, mirroring my exact stance about 30 feet away. I didn't think, didn't scream, I just took off. Full sprint the last 3/4 of a mile to work. Haven't experienced anything like it since. Don't know how I feel about it to this day. I've deduced that I'm mildly insane after all the things I've seen or heard, but I'll share some of my stories because, crazy or not, I believe everything that has happened. Sorry if this is long. I grew up in an old house. My parents still live in it. It's about 150 years old or so. When I was about 8, I swear I experienced interaction with a spirit. I was sitting on my bed playing with my stuffed Simba when my lace curtain moved. It didn't sway in the breeze. My window was shut and the air conditioning was off. Half of it filled out, resembling a full 1800s style skirt. It only filled out half of the curtain. rounding out and then abruptly laying against the window. I heard a young girl's voice. Being a child, I wasn't scared, I was just curious. It asked my name, and when I answered, it told me its name and age, Elizabeth. She was 9. She had a long, pretty dress with lace and hair that curled like Shirley Temple's, but went to her waist. She had this large white bow in her hair. I talked to Elizabeth for a few years. I'd ask her questions about where she's from, did she have siblings, what's her favorite thing to do. When I was upset, she would sometimes appear at the edge of my curtain and would brush lightly against my face, as if a hand brushing away tears. I never told anyone about her when I was young because I was afraid I'd get teased. When I was just shy of being 12, she came to me one day. She didn't talk, just appeared in my curtain. I asked if she was okay, and she replied she was cold and lonely. Right then my curtain filled fully, and a new voice named Sarah came, saying she had come to take Elizabeth away. It was the last time I ever heard from Elizabeth again. At 20, when I go home and can't sleep at night, I call out her name softly and wait for my curtain to come sweeping out like before, but it never does. I know it sounds like an imaginary friend, but imagination can't control how a fabric moves. Imagination can't create names and fashions that are common in a century I didn't even know about. Another less nostalgic episode happened about 3 years ago. Me and a friend had snuck out to see a boy. We met him in his car and listened to music for a few minutes. He was cute, but a stranger. Maybe he had said 5 words to the guy before. My friend and him start kissing and doing things while I sit uncomfortably next to them. Ugh. I get out of the car and run back to her house in the pouring rain. When I get to her room, I throw most of my wet clothes off and sit on her sister's bed in the dark. At first, I was pissed. She's go at it with a guy I thought was cute. Then I panicked, realizing that neither of us knew him well. He'd done crazy jail time worthy things, and my best friend was in his car alone. I couldn't breathe and put my knees to my chest trying to get air slowly. I started to hear this shrill, inhuman chattering sound and looked around. My friend's bed was pushed into a corner, and on the wall there was a black figure. It had spindly arms and legs and a body that hunched at an extreme angle. Its fingers were long with an extra joint. It loomed over her head, bending almost halfway over it. She came into the room, throwing light on the wall, and it vanished. She saw me with my hands over my ears, trying to keep the sound out, hyperventilating, staring at her wall. I didn't sleep all night, just staring at her wall, making sure it didn't come back for her. Along with the 2 distinct memories, I hear things all the time. Footsteps in an empty house, whispers, noises that are too strange to be animals or wind. I get chills when I walk into certain rooms of my parents' house. Sometimes when I'm walking home alone at night, the wind will blow leaves toward me from behind, and I'll hear a soft shouting that sounds like cursing or a foreign language. I often see shapes shifting or figures moving in my peripheral, but when I turn to see clearly, it vanishes. In my old 2-story house, there was a latch in the wall of the bedroom that led to a crawl space above the garage. It was ugly, so I put my nightstand in front of it. One night I woke up with a start. I was laying in bed for a few seconds after a deep sleep, staring at the ceiling in my pitch-black room and waiting for my brain to stir itself so I could do something. Then came a furious pounding on the wall, directly behind my bed frame. It could have been anything, but it was with the frequency of a person using their fists as vigorously as possible. It lasted steadily for hours, but actually probably 10 seconds in real time, before ceasing. Once when I was 8, I swear I saw something non-human standing in the corner of my room. It was around 10 p.m., and it lasted until about 1 a.m. I did the whole close my eyes and it will go away routine, but when I opened them, it was still there, standing, watching. Another time, when I was 13, I saw a ghost of a girl dash right past me in the woods when I lived in North Carolina. I think of her as a ghost because when I turned back, she was gone. There was no large trees for her to hide behind, and I doubt she was fast enough to get out of eyesight. The one with the thing in the corner still kinda scares me to this day. Just typing it in the dark forced me to dash to my light switch and flick it up in a heartbeat. Alright, it's another shout out time today, so I want to thank a few more people who had asked for it, so let's get to it. Gary Coleman, 6912, hello. Thanks for listening, and don't be shy. Say hi. You did. M83998, thank you for being here as well. Couldn't do it without all of you. Smash Pow! I hope you're doing well in Korea. I was in Korea for 2 months in the late 90s while I was on Okinawa. We did a mountain warfare training center there in Pohang with some of the Korean military as well. So, great country. I loved my time in South Korea, truly. And Virginia Viola 5097, good day, mate. And greetings from New York. Thanks for listening all the way from Australia. Have a great day, guys, and we'll see you soon. I'm pretty skeptical about all of this stuff. I have crazy dreams, intrusive thoughts, and sleep paralysis where my mind is awake, but my body is still paralyzed. And I'm trying to get out of a bad dream. I don't know what it is about me, but I've just never taken any of this seriously. And from a pretty early age, I was able to understand that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I used to turn my nose up at people who were super credulous, until I met my darling step-grandmother. She's a smart woman. She's atheist, no nonsense, and pretty awesome. But she genuinely believes she's been abducted by aliens. She doesn't talk about it with me, and I only know about this through my stepdad. She's been having abduction experiences since she was little. She believes they really happened, but she just chooses to ignore it. She'd be mortified if she knew that I knew. My step-grandfather and her kids are the only ones she's spoken to about it, and she doesn't have any paranormal interests otherwise. I'm not a particularly credulous person, so I don't think she's actually been abducted. Then again, I don't think she's just making things up either. I think she's had an experience that is so realistic that it is real to her. Getting to know her and getting to realize that she isn't a total loony has made me rethink the eye rolling that I used to do paranormal experiences. While I think most of this stuff can just be explained by the misfirings of remarkably creative and the brains we all possess, I don't think you're a bunch of loons. Just remember, the brain is a powerful instrument and is totally capable of presenting incredibly realistic but ultimately fake images and sensations. I have to believe in some paranormal instances. My father's old house had a few deaths occur, including a suicide. Before he bought the house, it was completely trashed. Think waist-high grass, rusty homemade knives, blood in sinks and walls, filth everywhere. We made it into a home again. Well, every now and then, weird things would happen. We would get locked out, or a door would open, or in my most terrifying case, I had a singing Justin Bieber doll, inside joke. That one time started playing on its own. Other than that, not too much. But when he said the house this year, the new owners, who were repainting before closing, they were our neighbors, had a lot of problems with doors slamming shut, radios being turned up way loud or completely off, or even objects being thrown in the air. My theory is maybe our guest ghost was worried about getting bad owners again. I enjoy taking runs after 9 p.m. I live in a genuinely safe neighborhood in the suburbs where mostly older folks and new parents live. Just a week or two ago I was running, and I have 2 small wooded areas in my subdivision where the houses' backyards are literally in the woods. I got to the last house on a sidewalk that runs adjacent to one of those patches of woods, and I heard some rustling. I normally have my iPod, so I wasn't used to hearing nature at night, so I ignored it for a split second. Out of the corner of my eye I saw movement, so I looked over, and there was a very skinny, naked thing. I don't know what it was, digging in the ground facing away from me. It was bald, slightly grayish, and had the most prominent and bony back I've ever seen. The second I actually looked at it, it stopped moving and sat still. I freaked out and continued running, and as I approached the streetlights about 2 blocks ahead, all of them began to turn off. I still feel like it didn't happen because it seems like something straight out of a horror movie, and I haven't told anyone other than my boyfriend because I myself have barely believed it happened. Me and my brother Kyle here, we were hitchhiking down a long and lonesome road. All of a sudden, there shined a shiny demon in the middle of the road, and he said, "Play the best song in the world or I'll eat your soul." Well, me and Kyle, we looked at each other and we were like, okay. We played the first thing that came to our heads, which just so happened to be the best song in the world. It was the best song in the world. Tenacious D. When my little brother was around 6 years old, we lived in a beach house in Daytona. He had the room directly across from the master bedroom. My room was on the other side of the house. I remember waking up to my room screaming at the top of her lungs one night. I ran into the living room and was looking into the hallway where she was pounding on an invisible door. The actual door was wide open to my brother's room. My brother was a couple of inches off the bed on his back. There were roaches and ants swarming all the walls visible from where I was standing in complete morbid shock. In the living room, my dad, ex-military and cop, started throwing bar stools and punches into the open doorway trying to get entrance. This went on for a good 45 minutes to an hour. My mother had called my grandma out of pure fear, and as soon as my grandma tried to enter the room, I shit you not, all the insects crawled toward the bed and disappeared underneath it. She walked into the room with no problem. My brother was laying face down on the floor at this point, screaming. She picked him up and walked into our living room. Our family has never talked about it since it happened. It's been over 10 years. I have nightmares at least once a month regarding this situation. I've never had any paranormal experiences myself unless you count the UFO. I'll go into that one later though. My mother, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, and her husband have all had experiences in one of their old houses, along with several friends of the family. Each of them has a story to tell me, and none of them doubt anything about it. Their old house was supposedly haunted. Doors would randomly slam. My aunt told me that she would hear footsteps coming down the hallway and toward her bedroom, only to stop at her door. My mother, who was pregnant with me, was using the bathroom in the middle of the night. Someone knocked at the door, and she replied that it was occupied. They kept knocking, and my mother was getting pissed, telling them to go away. Only her grandmother and grandfather were home at the time, and were both in bed. When she opened the door after finishing up, there was no one there. My uncle told me he heard voices whispering to him at night. All of them at one point has heard the bureau in the attic being moved around. The loud scrape of the legs moving across the wood floor. My grandmother's husband didn't believe these stories. He was a hard military guy, didn't take shit. One day, everyone in the house had gone out. He was downstairs watching TV. He hears the sound of the bureau being pushed or dragged along the floor of the attic. "Who the hell's up there? Knock that off." He shouts, thinking it was my mother or her siblings messing around or something. He hears it again, goes upstairs to tell them off, and realizes that no one else is in the house. He told me that he got right the out of there and didn't come back until my grandmother came back home. This story takes place in a different house. My grandmother's brother was an alcoholic. One day, he was walking home drunk from the bar and fell off a bridge. He had taken out a life insurance policy only a few weeks prior, so the family didn't think it was an accident. The funeral happens a few days later, and the funeral procession happens to pass by the house they lived, as it was located on a major road in the town. As they passed by their house on fire, flames were billowing out of the room, her brother's old room. They halted the procession to get out and called the fire department. After everything was put out, they found that there was no fire damage in his room. None of his belongings were burned. The carpet was intact. There were no black marks along the walls. No peeled paint, nothing. It looked like nothing at all that happened in that room, even though they had seen flames billowing out of the window just minutes before. They then used the money from great-great-uncle's life insurance to buy the haunted house they would later live in. There are many, many stories that they've all told me. Too many to recount. I'm an extremely skeptical person. I don't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but I don't believe that they're lying. I can't believe it's true, but I know for a fact that they aren't lying. I don't believe in the supernatural at all, but I used to live in a house where weird stuff seemed to happen all the time. The most common example I use is of me sitting next to my cat in the basement, and I hear a light thumping noise right next to me. My cat gets up and quickly runs away, so I stood up, and right next to me was my keyboard, meaning electronic piano, being played on its own. It was unplugged, so there was no sound other than what the keys made. It freaked the living shit out of me. I just ran outside as fast as I could and didn't come back until really had to. There are a lot of other examples that were less unusual, but still freaked me out, usually related to stuff moving without any sort of physical contact. My mom had a couple of stories too. This may get buried as I'm a little late to the party. My family owns a large property that dates back to the 1820-ish, although a particular staircase may be older. The house has 2 staircases. At first I thought it was just me. Even typing this gives me shivers, but I felt cold, unhappy, dark, odd thoughts would cross my mind when using the staircase, so I stopped. Over 3 years I've discovered my brother, sister, cousins, and wife all have had experienced odd feelings going up and down this staircase. And, as a result, almost nobody in my family uses it. Young kids in particular pretty much start screaming the second they go near it. I'm a hugely rational person, and I don't believe in spirits, ghosts, or God, but I do believe houses can feel or change depending on their past. Something happened on that staircase. I was maybe 6 years old and it was Halloween. Woke up at night and looked across the room to my dresser and saw a huge green glowing orb just sitting there. I freaked out and ever so slowly put the covers up over my head for protection. I mean, everyone knows being under a blanket provides immunity to ghosts. Next morning I wake like normal, go to the kitchen. Then I remember what happened last night. From the dresser to find the blob was my bag of candy I didn't realize glowed in the dark. I used to live in an apartment building on Elm Street in Winstead, Connecticut. If you Google map it, it'll be the biggest building and right on the corner across from a parking lot. Anyways, I live on the top floor, and during the evening and night, you could hear what sounded like children playing in the attic. Now, the attic was always locked and only ran 1, 2 to 3/4 the length of the building. You could hear it through our apartment, and the basement used to stable horses close to 90 years ago, and you could hear horses sometimes down there. There was also a rocking chair in a locked room in the attic. There was also rocking. There was also no airflow up there. My stepfather was so creeped out by it, he actually took it out, broke it, and thawed it out. And I shit you not, the exact chair was back in the exact spot. Dust and all the other days later. Also, Dudley Town was in Connecticut. Pretty creepy place.